Welcome to the newest episode of Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. I'm your host, Jason Fraley, picking the brains of the top filmmakers, musicians, and artists of our time. Today marks 20 years since HBO's The Wire premiered on June 2nd, 2002, becoming one of the greatest TV dramas of all time. I spoke to The Wire creator David Simon at the inaugural Double Exposure Investigative Film Festival at the Smithsonian's National Portrait Gallery in 2015. Simon's crime reporting for the Baltimore Sun inspired NBC's Homicide: Life on the Street and Season 5 of The Wire, so he was the perfect choice to moderate the festival's opening night Q&A for Spotlight, which would go on to win the Oscar for Best Picture. I'm here with David Simon, the creator of The Wire and Q&A conductor here for Spotlight here, which was, I gotta say, I was sitting here in the theater here and just blown away. And I'm right there with you when you were saying during the Q&A when you're yelling out cut to black as the phones are going off. I shared that sentiment entirely. What was it like sitting here watching this as a filmmaker, calling for it to cut to black?
Well, I mean, I saw the film a couple nights ago, and I was calling then, so I mean, I actually didn't see the end of it here. But having said that, I just felt it was a very brave film in the sense of the story does tell itself as it gets going, and it's entirely worthy of the time and the effort spent to tell it. But it's the kind of film that doesn't get told enough because it lacks all the things that the entertainment industry thinks is currency. There's not a lot of sex in it. There's not a lot of violence.
Lots of paper.
But there's a lot of paper, and there's a lot of ideas, and there's a lot of humanity. And the actual stakes of something that we all should be vested in as a society is laid bare. And it's just like films don't get made because they have this currency and not the other crap. And so to see it executed as well as it was, and to be up there with the filmmakers and with the subjects of the film, just delighted it got made. I was happy to be able to exhibit it tonight.
Absolutely. And a big point you made here that I thought was a crucial point that you made, and a crucial point of the movie too, is the idea of how the journalist could have stopped, but the editor saying, "Hold on," and there's a bigger fish to fry. There's a bigger fish to fry. And in a way, The Wire was like that too. I mean, you start on a lower level and you expose it out. But
we're in entertainment,
right.
And that's our job is to be playing for the last 20 minutes of film. You're making a film, you want the whole thing to hold together. Journalism doesn't always get those opportunities. Sometimes the story has to go. Sometimes you go on less than perfect information. You try to get it right. You try never to get it wrong. But you may get it incomplete. It's the first draft of whatever you're trying to explain to people. But
I guess my question's more the courage of a screenwriter and the skill it takes to craft something where it's rather than a small sliver, but that you're tackling the institutionalized corruption or something.
It's just it's a different target. You need more time. It has to be long form. In the same way, I guess, to follow your analogy, that this was long form journalism. This was a long-term investigative project by a group of reporters. I very much admired the restraint and the care that they showed, and the delicacy of reporting. Reporting, to me, was, as Mencken said, it was the life of kings when it was done well. And it may not have always ended as well, and not every story was gold, and sometimes you wasted your time, and sometimes you spun your wheels. But it was never not fun, and it never felt purposeless in the way that sometimes being in the entertainment industry is. Like I said, watching it was kind of like porn for me. It was nostalgic porn.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll just wrap up. So I know
Sure.
But the final one, I just want to talk to you from, I did some time up at the Sun, and what years were you there?
I was there 1982. I started as a stringer in 82, and I was there to 95.
Gotcha. So just speak to that a little bit in terms of why we need more papers like this to devote resources for long-form investigations, and sort of what you were mentioning on the stage in terms of what the internet age maybe made us rush to judgment on certain stories.
Well, the amateurs can't do this. There's a lot that the internet can do. The immediacy of real-time reaction and what the internet can provide. There's certain things that ordinary people can achieve and can cover certain things in a very immediate and basic way. But what you just watched was journalism that can never be the amateur hour. It has to be professionals, it has to be people who devote their lives to it, who look upon it as a career, who expect there to be a paycheck. Maybe not the best paycheck you can make for that skill set, but certainly enough that you can send your kid to school and pay your mortgage and have a life doing the same thing every day, and coming back to work every day and and beating the hell out of a story. It has to be professional. And at the paper I was at, there's 120 people where there used to be 500, and that dynamic, the Baltimore metro area is the same size. The problems are the same size or bigger, but the number of people devoted to it is much less. And until they figure out the revenue stream, society's going to suffer.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Well, thanks for taking the time.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bess.
I spoke to Simon again at the 2017 Maryland Film Festival during the grand reopening of the Parkway Theatre in Baltimore. We actually spoke down at the spotlight screening, at the premiere. Yeah. It was afterwards. I guess before we dive into all this, let's do a postmortem on that. So that went on to win Best Picture.
It did pretty well for itself.
But then here we are a year later, and now everyone's talking fake news, and then journalism is coming back and holding people accountable now. So where do you sort of stand post-spotlight?
Certainly, if you were a journalist and you were having an existential crisis over the revenue stream and over all the losses that journalism had suffered, this last election cycle has proved the need for you. Now, whether or not that translates into a revenue stream is still a long, hard fight, because the problems are still the problems in terms of the product and where the money comes from now with the internet. But it's pretty apparent that the amateur hour won't work.
Right.
That the unaccredited, I'll say what I want and you figure out whether it's true or not version of the online news element is flawed.
Yeah.
And that you actually need news organizations, you need people accredited, you need people accountable, you need the work to be sourced. And all the people who said it was going to be the amateur hour and everyone was going to be a citizen journalist, they kind of look like jerks right now, or they look like jerks or Russian bots, one of the two. So.
Awesome. Well, let's dive into the reason we're actually here. Talk about, before we get into the festival itself, but just the fact that this theater's back here. I think I heard you talking with John Waters. Did I hear him say that he saw Psycho down the street, or do you ever remember coming up here? I know from D.C.
No, you got to remember, not to that extent, because to me, I grew up in D.C. The Silver Theater, which is now AFI, was my local theater. So no, if you wanted to see stuff on a big screen when I was a kid, you went to the Uptown in D.C. I got here in '83, so. You want to talk to somebody about what was around here filming? Talk to Barry, talk to John.
But just in general, it's still as a generally local guy growing up around here. And obviously your shows are set up here, Wire and Homicidal and stuff. Just what does it mean to have an old historic theater back open in Baltimore? Oh, and this as a venue, this is excellent because first of all, this area is sort of the home base of the film festival. And has been for years now. This is incredibly valuable property for as a venue, just for independent filmmakers and for young filmmakers to get their work shown. It's hard to get into theaters, and art houses are essential for that. Baltimore just acquired a top-flight art house here. Not to mention, it's a venue for educational stuff, for training crew, for getting people engaged in an industry that, let's face it, it's one of the few growth industries left in this country, and jobs matter, and this is a clean industry. So I'm elated that Jed and the Producers Club and the Film Festival, they all brought it through. It's really been it's been a long haul for them, and I'm very proud. You mentioned local filmmakers, and it's hard for them to get their work seen. What advice do you have for them? If there's any of our listeners that are maybe aspiring filmmakers or local film students or whatever, what's the most common mistake you see them make, and how can they actually break through being an East Coast filmmaker?
I'm a terrible person to ask for that because my path to being a television writer and producer was really improbable. It came off of a prose work that I did that Barry Levinson bought. and then they filmed it in my town, and I learned how to do it through a back door, really. I didn't go to film school. I didn't know which end of the camera was which to begin with. So I'm really a terrible person. Like, when people come to me and say, how do I get into the movie business? I'm like, if I ever figure it out, I'll let you know. But I'm not being flippant. But I would say one of the things is just to do it. There is so much now in terms of video. There's less that's required now technically and in terms of equipment to go out and to tell a film narrative. Certainly to create your first short or something, and to get on the to try to get onto the festival circuit. It used to be you needed a darkroom, you needed to cut film, you needed to videotape, and the digital abilities that come with that have really made it possible for people to dive in. And that you can do the stuff you can do on a laptop now is extraordinary.
Final question, got to ask you about The Wire. Arguably my favorite show of all time. How are you able to create so many? I mean, there's probably 24 characters that all get equal screen time, that they're just lodged in our brains like decades later. I mean, what's the secret to giving them the right amount of time, but also be able to build those arcs? I mean, there's so many great characters.
I don't know. I don't know why it has resonance. Honestly, it's not even the most. I'm proud of it. It turned out very well, I think, but it wasn't even the most. How should I say it? In terms of execution, there are other things I've done where I thought turned out much more precise.
Which were some of those things?
I thought Generation Kill was turns out in terms of execution. But I guess The Wire went on for 60 hours, and people became accustomed to the world and the characters, and it found some zeitgeist. But I don't know. We did the best we could. We always do the best we can.
Well, keep doing the best you can. Yeah. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Good seeing you again.
You too. Finally, in 2020, I spoke to George Pelecanos, who co-produced The Wire before joining Simon to create The Deuce and We Own This City.
George Pelecanos.
You're partly behind arguably the greatest show of all time, and season 2, I think, always gets the short shaft. Everyone always holds up, season 1 and 3 and 4, and I love season 2. So, yeah, I mean, George, is it wild? You watch Lovecraft Country, and you see Omar coming. You watch Concrete Cowboys coming out, and you see Idris. You watch Black Panther, and you're like, oh, that's the answer to Where's Wallace. You see all these people going on, and they're massive now.
Yeah, I'm super happy for them. They're all great people. And then I just saw that Wendell Pierce got cast as B.B. King. He's going to be playing B.B. King. Perfect, and Wendell is just a great guy.
Yeah, and then you see Clay Davis is in The Five Bloods. It's like every acclaimed movie. Gosh, Game of Thrones, Littlefinger was the mayor. That's nice. You have that whole stable of actors that you can, that whole ensemble you can tap for future films. Tell our, maybe there's some other aspiring listeners listening to this. They've shot their film. How did you get distribution?
I do want to say, don't get discouraged, because, everybody wants to get into Sundance. Everybody wants to get into Toronto, all that stuff. And chances are you're not going to get in. It's a very political process. It's about connections. And, if you can get a movie star to play the role, even in a low budget film, they'll let you in to those festivals because they want the movie star to come to the festival to give them more press. Make a good film. That's my advice. There's ways to do it, but just don't get discouraged because you don't get into the biggest one. It doesn't mean that your film doesn't have worth.
You're right. The analogy I always liken it to is, you could have made the best film in the world, but it's the festivals. It's like a bunch of people shooting basketballs all at the same hoop. They're not going to get in. So I think it's kind of cool that the streaming world, you can bypass a lot of that and get it straight to the audience. So that's great. I rank like the best 30 movies in 30 genres in August. I'm going to narrow it down to one. I've always loved Vertigo. I think there's so much going on in Vertigo. But, The Godfather, and then, It's a Wonderful Life and Field of Dreams. Signs, that kind of stuff always touches I have a magical realism. So those kind of movies and Groundhog Day, those kind of speak to my soul a little bit. But for filmmaking skill, like Coppola and Hitchcock and God, yeah, those are my gems, I think.
The Wild Bunch.
Mike Srago, who used to write, he was the critic for the Baltimore Sun. I used to intern up with him. That was his favorite movie.
Yeah, I think there's a book called The Westerns of Sam Peckinpah, where they devote 100 pages to that film. And when you read those 100 pages, you'll realize why that film is one of the great works of art of the 20th century. And it actually changed my life, because I saw it with my dad in the theater first run. And when I walked out of there, I was like, that's what I want to do. You know what I mean? I was a little kid.
Wow, you got to see it in the theater? I'm so jealous. I really wish I could transport myself back in time and see a lot of those in the theater the first time, Ride the High Country is good too, but Wild Bunch is on another level. The way it intercuts. I always think of that opening where the guy's on the horse and he goes through the window, and, you know what I mean? But they show it 3 different times.
Yeah, they shot a lot of film on that when they I think when that movie was done, it had the record for the most amount of film shot on any movie ever at that time.
I wouldn't doubt it. And William Holden and Borgnine, they're awesome. I could talk about that all day.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for joining us on Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. Remember to hit the subscribe button and give us a 5-star rating if you like what you hear. We'll see you next time. I wanted to take a second to tell you about an app I really enjoy. Living in the D.C. area is great, and Podcast D.C. gathers all of the local shows that I like all in one local app. Health, sports, local news, politics, and so much more. Podcast D.C. is the new local app with hundreds of D.C. area podcasts to choose from. I can earn exciting rewards just for listening and share the podcasts I love instantly. Available in the App Store or in Google Play, listen local with Podcast D.C.